The Chicago wind roared through the streets like a runaway train, slicing through the night with a bitter edge, snow swirling in thick, relentless sheets under a sky bruised gray and heavy. The city's usual hum faded under the storm's grip, leaving Michigan Avenue draped in a quiet, icy hush as dusk turned to dark. At a lonely bus stop, tucked beneath a street lamp buzzing with a faint, tired flicker, Jack Sullivan stood hunched against the cold, his breath puffing out in quick, frosty bursts that hung in the air like ghosts. At 47, he was a man worn thin, a once steady structural engineer, now clutching a tattered manila folder tight to his chest, 5 resumes inside, each one a silent slap of rejection from a world that had moved on without him. His olive jacket flapped in the gusts, its frayed cuffs and patched elbows barely holding back the chill that seeped through his scuffed boots, the soles thin as paper after months of pounding pavement. The neon glow of a 24-hour diner blinked across the street, 8:52 p.m., the sign said, its red digits cutting through the haze. But the bus was late, as always, leaving Jack to shift his weight from one numb foot to the other, the snow piling soft and cruel around his ankles. His shoulders sagged heavy, the day's failures stacking up like the drifts at his feet. Another job fair, another "we'll call you," another night with nothing to show. Then, through the white curtain of the storm, a figure stumbled into view, a woman, maybe 35, stepping unsteady onto the icy sidewalk, her sleek pencil skirt and thin blouse no match for the wind's bite. No coat, just heels clicking sharp and uneven, her dark hair plastered wet against her face as she ducked under the bus stop's awning, arms wrapped tight around herself, shivering hard enough to rattle her frame. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps, her hands trembling as she rubbed them together, chasing warmth that wouldn't come. Jack kept his eyes low. Just another stranger, just another night. But the wind howled again, a piercing wail that made her flinch and curl inward, her shoulders hunching like she might break. He couldn't look away this time. His jacket wasn't much. Threadbare, patched from a thrift store bin. But it was something. And the cold already gnawed at him anyway. Without a word, he shrugged it off, the chill clawing into his skin like a pack of wolves, and stepped toward her, the snow crunching under his boots. "Take it," he said, his voice gruff, roughened by days of silence, holding the jacket out like an offering. She startled, her wide hazel eyes snapping up to meet his, sharp and bright despite the storm. "No, you'll freeze!" she protested, her voice shaky but firm, teeth chattering between words. Jack's cracked lips twitched into a faint, tired smile, a ghost of the man he used to be. "I've got nothing left to lose tonight," he said, low and steady. It's all I've got to give." She hesitated, her gaze flicking from the jacket to his face, then back again, like she was weighing him, testing the truth in his words. He didn't wait. Gently, he draped it over her shoulders, the faded olive fabric swallowing her slim frame, its warmth cutting through the cold that had settled into her bones. She pulled it tight, almost by instinct, her fingers clutching the collar as a shiver eased out of her. "Thank you," she whispered, the words soft but heavy, carrying over the wind. "Jack?" he said simply, nodding once. "Elise," she replied, her voice steadier now, a flicker of something, gratitude, maybe more, passing through her eyes. They stood there, snow dusting their shoes, the silence stretching between them like a thread pulled taut, fragile but real. Headlights pierced the storm then, the low rumble of a bus breaking the spell as it groaned to a stop, its doors hissing open with a blast of warm air. Elise moved toward it, then paused, turning back to Jack, his jacket still wrapped around her like a shield. "Do you have somewhere to go?" she asked, her brow creasing just enough to show she cared. Jack shrugged, hands shoved deep into his pockets, the cold already sinking into his bones. "Somewhere," he said, vague and clipped. Not about to spill that somewhere was a rusted truck parked behind a South Side factory. She reached into her purse, pulling out a sleek black business card, its edges crisp against the chaos of the night, and pressed it into his hand. "If you ever need anything," she said, her fingers brushing his, steady despite the tremble in her frame. He took it, slipping it into his folder without a glance. People tossed out promises like that all the time, and he'd stopped believing them years ago. She stepped onto the yes, glancing back once more, her silhouette framed by the glow of the interior, his jacket her armor against the storm. Jack watched until the taillights vanished into the swirling white, the card a faint weight against his chest, his arms folded tight to fend off the chill. Alone again, he tilted his head back, snowflakes catching in his lashes as he stared into the sky, a whisper slipping out. Maybe tomorrow. Then he turned, trudging into the dark, a flicker of something small, quiet, powerful, sparking deep inside him. A spark this Chicago night's about to blow wide open. Folks, this is just the start of Jack's wild ride. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell right now, 'cause this story's got twists that'll grab you hard and won't let go. Stick with me, America. Elise and Jack are about to shake things up. Jack Sullivan's boots crunched through the thickening snow as he left the Michigan Avenue bus stop behind, the storm swallowing Chicago's glow in a shroud of white, the wind howling like a beast set loose on the city's empty streets. His hands stayed jammed deep in his pockets, the cold biting into his knuckles now that his olive jacket, his only shield, was gone, draped over Elise's shoulders instead. That flicker of warmth he'd felt watching her bus disappear faded fast, replaced by the familiar ache of a night with nowhere to go but back to the grind. He wound his way south, past shuttered storefronts and flickering streetlights, the South Side's industrial sprawl looming ahead like a graveyard of rust and shadows. His destination wasn't a warm bed or a lit window, just a '95 Ford pickup parked tight against the crumbling brick of an old factory, its faded blue paint chipped and peeling. A tarp lashed over the tailgate, flapping uselessly in the gusts. The windshield was frosted over, spiderwebbed with cracks from a long-ago rock, and Jack brushed a sleeve across it, clearing just enough to see the dark hollow inside. He yanked the driver's door open with a groan of metal, climbed in, and sank into the seat. A makeshift home of threadbare blankets piled high, a flattened pillow wedged against the armrest, and a dented thermos of cold tomato soup tucked under the dash, next to a granola bar wrapper he'd scavenged from a dumpster that morning. The air inside smelled of damp steel and stale coffee, the heater dead for years. But it was his, 4 walls on wheels, all he had left. Jack settled in, the cold seeping through the cracked window as he pulled a small tin box from the glove compartment, its hinges squeaking like a sigh as he pried it open. Inside, a faded photo stared back. Sarah, his wife, her hazel eyes bright with a smile that could melt ice, and Liam, their son, 8 years old then, clutching a toy rocket with a gap-toothed grin that matched hers. "Good night, Sarah," he whispered, his voice rough, scraped raw by the day. "Good night, Liam." He leaned back, the photo resting on his chest, letting memories flood in like a tide he couldn't stop. Once he'd been Jack Sullivan, the guy who sketched blueprints for schools and bridges, who'd come home to Sarah's off-key humming in their Logan Square bungalow, who'd spent Saturdays building Liam a treehouse with scrap lumber and too many nails. They weren't rich. Her nurse's salary and his engineering gigs kept them afloat. But they were happy, a family stitched together with laughter and late-night talks. Then cancer hit Sarah like a freight train. Stage 4, found too late, 9 brutal months from diagnosis to a quiet hospital room where her hand slipped from his. Jack quit his job to sit by her bed, drained their savings on chemo that bought days, not years, sold the house to settle debts that kept coming. After she was gone, he and Liam drifted. Motels, rentals, then this truck, where he'd turned the back seat into a spaceship, soup cans into adventures, a parking lot into their world. He'd kept his chin up for Liam, shaving each morning with a cracked mirror, tucking in his shirt like it mattered. "Why bother?" a shelter cook once asked. Jack had grinned, faint but real. "My kid needs to believe I've got this, and I need to look like I do. But last winter broke him." A social worker knocked, her clipboard heavy with judgment. "This isn't safe for a boy," she'd said, eyeing the truck's peeling interior, the frost on the windows. Jack's throat had closed, his hands shaking as he signed the papers, Liam's small arms clinging tight before they took him away. "I'll get you back, kiddo," he'd choked out, voice cracking as the car pulled off, Liam's face pressed to the glass. Since then, every day was a fight. Job fairs with forced smiles, day labor hauling bricks for cash that vanished into gas and soup, nights hunched over library books, relearning codes he'd once known cold. Tonight, though, was different. Handing Elise that jacket, seeing her pull it close, sparked something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope, not yet. Just a whisper of the old Jack, the one who gave more than he took, the one Sarah had loved. He pulled a blanket over his shoulders, its edges fraying like his life, and pressed his head against the icy window, the storm raging outside. The thermos sat untouched. He wasn't hungry, just tired, bone-deep tired. His eyes drifted shut, the photo slipping to his lap, Liam's crayon rocket a faint glow in the dark. Jack's down, but not out, folks. This Chicago winter's testing him hard. And that jacket's about to set off a chain reaction. You won't believe Elise Harper stepped out of the snowy Chicago night and into the polished glow of her Lakeview high-rise, the lobby's heat wrapping around her like a blanket after the storm's brutal bite. The doorman tipped his hat with a quiet, "Evening, ma'am," but she barely nodded, her heels clicking sharp and hollow on the marble floor as she rode the elevator up, 30 floors to a penthouse that gleamed with silence. No hum of voices, no clatter of life, just the low buzz of a smart fridge and the wind rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows, a distant howl against the glass that framed the city's skyline like a painting she never stopped to see. She was still wrapped in Jack's jacket, that oversized olive thing he'd pressed on her at the bus stop, its frayed edges brushing her knees, the faint scent of pine and worn cotton cutting through the sterile chill of her world. She'd tried to give it back. Lord knows she'd argued. But his tired smile, that gruff, "I've got nothing left to lose tonight," had shut her down. Left her clutching it like a lifeline she didn't know she needed. Now, stepping into her apartment, she dropped her purse on a sleek black console, the leather thudding soft against the quiet, and started to peel the jacket off, ready to toss it on a chair like some thrift store relic. But her fingers snagged on something, a lump in the inner pocket, small but stubborn, and she paused, curiosity tugging at her. She reached in, pulling out a folded square of paper, creased deep, smudged with time and fingerprints, its edges worn thin like it had been handled 1,000 times. Elise unfolded it slow, careful, like it might crumble in her hands, and there it was. A kid's crayon drawing, rough and bright. 2 stick figures standing hand in hand under a wobbly yellow sun. One was labeled Dad in shaky blue letters, the other Me in red, a lopsided heart floating between them like a promise. At the bottom, in uneven scrawl, the words hit her like a punch. "I love you, Daddy, Liam." Her breath caught hard, a sharp little gasp that echoed in the empty room, her polished nails digging into her palm as she sank onto the edge of her leather couch, the jacket pooling around her, the drawing trembling in her grip. Jack wasn't just some guy at a bus stop. He was a father, a man carrying his kid's love in the only thing he had left, and he'd given it to her without a second thought. Her chest tightened, a knot she couldn't swallow, and memories crashed in like a wave she'd dammed up for years. She was 13 again, a foster kid shivering on a church stoop in Gary, Indiana. No coat, no family, just a skinny girl with nowhere to go, curled tight against a winter that didn't care. An old janitor named Amos had found her, his face weathered like cracked leather, his parka threadbare but warm as he draped it over her shoulders. He'd sat with her till dawn, saying nothing but, "You're enough, kid," in a voice soft as gravel, and that night, that one act, lit a fire in her. She'd clawed her way out, scholarships, late-night coding, building Horizon Tech from a dorm room dream to a Chicago Titan, but somewhere she'd buried that girl, that need, under glass walls and corner offices. Now, staring at Liam's heart, Elise's eyes stung, tears welling hot and fast, spilling down her cheeks as she hugged Jack's jacket close, the fabric rough against her skin. She hadn't cried in decades, not since she'd learned to armor up, to trade softness for steel. But this broke her open, raw and messy. Jack's kindness wasn't just a coat. It was a mirror, reflecting a piece of her she'd forgotten, a piece Amos had seen all those years ago. She sobbed, shoulders shaking, not from loss or pain, but from something deeper, a beautiful, aching crack in the wall she'd built around herself. The drawing slipped to her lap, that little red heart glaring up at her, and she wiped her face with the back of her hand, breath hitching as she steadied herself. Jack didn't know her, didn't know she was Elise Harper, CEO of Horizon Tech, a name on billboards and business mags, but he'd given her more than warmth. He'd given her back a memory, a truth she'd let slip away. She stood, the jacket still in her arms, her reflection sharp in the window against the snowy skyline. This wasn't ending here. She wouldn't let it. Elise is shaken, folks. That jacket's more than fabric. It's a wake-up call, and she's not sitting still. The morning sun barely pierced the thick Chicago clouds, casting a pale, cold light over the city as Elise Harper sat at her desk in Horizon Tech's glass-walled tower, the skyline stretching out like a promise she'd already claimed. A cold espresso sat untouched beside her, steam long gone, while Liam's crayon drawing lay open on the polished wood, its wobbly sun and shaky heart staring up at her like a quiet dare. She hadn't slept, not really. Jack's tired smile, the weight in his voice, the way he'd handed over his only jacket replayed in her mind all night, a loop she couldn't shake. That drawing, tucked in the pocket of a coat he'd given away, had cracked something open in her, and now she couldn't let it go, not the kindness, not the man behind it. She buzzed her assistant, Tara, her voice cutting through the hum of the office like a blade. "Tara, get in here. I need you to find someone," she said, calm but sharp, her fingers tapping the desk. Tara stepped in, tablet in hand, her sharp eyes narrowing just a touch. "Who are we looking for, boss?" Elise paused, then leaned forward. "His name's Jack. No last name yet. Michigan and Randolph bus stop, last night, around 8:30. He gave me his jacket. Find him." Tara's brow lifted, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but she nodded fast. "Discreet? Always," Elise shot back, her tone leaving no room for debate. Tara tapped her screen and slipped out, leaving Elise alone with the drawing, her thumb brushing the creased edge as she stared out at the city. She wasn't just curious, she was hooked, and she'd move mountains to track him down. Over the next 3 days, Horizon Tech's team, usually tasked with poaching coders or sniffing out startup gold, turned their skills to a different hunt, piecing together Jack's shadow of a life with a quiet, relentless hum. Traffic cams from Michigan Avenue caught his blurry figure, hunched in that olive jacket before he gave it away. Time-stamped 8:41 p.m. Bus logs narrowed down riders from that stop. Cross-referenced with burner phone pings from job boards, scraps of data piling up like clues in a detective flick. A forum post popped up, some guy asking about construction gigs, listing a prepaid number that led to a name. Jack Sullivan, ex-engineer, no fixed address, last tied to a South Side warehouse district. Tara slid a thin file across Elise's desk late Wednesday, her voice low. Jack Sullivan, used to design bridges, schools, the works. No steady job since 19, no arrests, just gone quiet. We spotted him yesterday, 47th and Halsted, old blue Ford truck parked behind a factory. He's living in it. Elise flipped the file open, a grainy driver's license photo, eyes tired but steady, an expired certification, a LinkedIn page frozen in time, like a ghost of who he'd been. She snapped it shut, the silence in her office heavy as lead, and stood, grabbing her coat. Not Jack's, that stayed folded on her couch at home. "Take me there," she said, already moving. Tara hesitated, her heels clicking to keep up. "Elise, we could send a guy, make it clean." "No!" Elise cut her off, voice like steel. "This isn't business. It's personal." An hour later, the black SUV rolled through Southside's grit, past graffiti-smeared walls, shuttered lots, and folks hunched against the wind. stopping near a rusted factory, its brick crumbling into the snow. There it was, the '95 Ford, blue paint chipped to nothing, snow piled around its tires like it hadn't moved in weeks. Elise stepped out, her boots crunching gravel, the air thick with rust and damp concrete, her breath fogging in the chill. Through the fogged windshield, a shape stirred. Jack, stirring slow, then pushing the door open with a creak that echoed in the quiet. He blinked into the daylight, flannel shirt wrinkled, boots dusted white, his face shifting from confusion to recognition as he spotted her. "Elise?" he rasped, voice rough with sleep and shock, his hands shoving into his pockets like he could hide the mess of his life. She offered a small, real smile, stepping closer. "Hi, Jack." He glanced down. Scuffed boots, faded jeans, the truck's peeling shell behind him. Then back at her, a flush of embarrassment creeping up his neck. "What are you doing here?" he asked, crossing his arms tight. "Finding you," she said, simple and steady, her hazel eyes locked on his. He frowned, snow catching in his dark hair, voice dropping low. "Why?" Elise took a breath, the drawing's red heart flashing in her mind. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you did, giving your only jacket to a stranger, no questions, no catch. I had to know who you are." Jack's jaw tightened, a bitter laugh slipping out. "You didn't need to track me down for that. A thank you note would have done fine." She shook her head, stepping closer, her voice firm but warm. "It's not about thanks, Jack. It's about not letting something good vanish without a trace." They stood there, the wind whistling through the factory's broken windows, two worlds colliding in the snow, his a rusted shell, hers a glass tower, and neither backing down. Elise has Jack in her sights now, folks. This Chicago hunt's about to shift gears, and it's going to hit you right in the feels. The Lakeview construction site hummed with the grind of machinery under a gray Chicago sky, snow flurries dusting the air as Jack Sullivan hauled cinder blocks in a steady, unbroken rhythm, his breath puffing out in sharp clouds against the cold. His flannel shirt hung loose, sleeves rolled to his forearms despite the wind's bite, the faded red checkers streaked with dust and sweat, proof of a man who'd learned to keep moving, no matter the weight. Elise Harper watched from her black SUV, parked discreetly across the cracked asphalt lot, her fingers drumming the steering wheel as she clocked him for 20 minutes, lifting, stacking, hauling, silent and sure, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. She'd tracked him here after finding him at the truck, that rusted shell on the south side, and now she saw it clear. Jack wasn't just surviving, he was fighting, even if he didn't know it yet. She grabbed a steaming coffee from the cup holder, black, no frills, like she figured he'd take it, and stepped out, her boots crunching gravel as she crossed the site. Jack sat on a low concrete ledge for his break, a plastic water bottle dangling from his calloused hand, his shoulders hunched as he caught his breath. He looked up as she approached, doing a double take, his tired eyes narrowing. "Elise?" he said, voice rough with surprise, brushing dust off his jeans as he stood quick. "Hey, Jack?" she replied, a small, genuine smile tugging at her lips as she held out the coffee. "Thought you might like something warm." He took it slow, hesitant, his gaze flicking from the cup to her face, searching for the catch. "You again. What's this about?" he asked, cradling the heat in his hands. "Just checking in," she said, then tilted her head, her hazel eyes steady. "Come with me, just an hour. I've got something to show you." Jack smirked, a dry chuckle slipping out as he nodded toward the foreman barking orders across the lot. "Got a shift to finish. Can't just walk off." Elise didn't blink. "Already cleared it," she said, smooth and sure. "Told him you've got an interview." His brows shot up, the smirk fading fast. "I don't have an interview," he said, voice low, suspicion creeping in. "You do now," she shot back, a spark of challenge in her tone that made him pause. He stared at her, then laughed, short, sharp, more disbelief than humor, and shook his head. "All right, lady, let's see what you're playing at," he said, tossing the empty water bottle aside and following her to the SUV. They rode in silence, Jack fidgeting in the passenger seat, his dusty jeans stark against the leather, his rough hands brushing nervously at his collar, conscious of the grime, the sweat, the years etched into him. Elise drove straight to Horizon Tech's downtown tower, its glass facade gleaming like a beacon against the city's grit. Jack hesitated in the marble lobby, the buzz of suits and polished chrome swallowing him whole. "I don't fit here," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper, his boots scuffing the floor. Elise turned, unfazed. "Just come upstairs," she said, leading him to a sleek conference room, the skyline sprawling gold and gray through floor-to-ceiling windows. She closed the door with a soft click, gestured to a chair, and slid a crisp folder across the table as he sat, his frame stiff against the leather. "This isn't about the jacket. I kept that. It's mine now," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Jack frowned, flipping the folder open, his rough fingers brushing the paper. A job offer stared back, bold letters spelling out Human Values Advisor at Horizon Tech. "What's this?" he asked, voice tight, his eyes scanning the lines like they might bite. Elise leaned forward, elbows on the table, her gaze locked on his. "It's a role I created. For you. You'd sit with our teams, not for numbers or tech, but for people, compassion, values, what you've lived through. You'd shape us, Jack, from the inside." He laughed, dry and jagged, shaking his head as he shoved the folder back an inch. "Elise, look at me. I sleep in a truck. I haul bricks. I'm no advisor. I don't have a fancy degree or a corner office past." She didn't flinch, her voice softening but firm. "You built a moment I'll never forget. Gave me your only jacket, no strings, when you had nothing left. You know what it's like to be invisible and still care. That's not on a resume. That's leadership, Jack. The kind no school can teach." He looked away, jaw clenching, the coffee trembling in his grip. Hope dangled there, a lifeline he didn't trust, clashing with the doubt that had kept him alive this long. Elise wasn't backing down, her eyes burning with a quiet fire. "I'm not offering charity," she said, voice steady as steel. "I'm offering a chance, because you reminded me what matters, and I think you can remind a whole company too." Jack swallowed hard, the room shrinking around him, his breath catching as he stared at the folder, tempted, terrified, teetering on the edge. Elise is throwing Jack a curveball, folks. This Chicago tale's hitting a tipping point, and it's gonna shake things up big time. Jack Sullivan sat alone on a bench outside Horizon Tech's gleaming tower, the Chicago wind tugging at his flannel as dusk painted the skyline in streaks of gold and gray, the job folder from Elise resting unopened in his lap like a brick he couldn't lift. His fingers traced its edges, rough from years of hauling concrete, but his eyes stared blank at the rush of suits spilling out into the evening. Doubt gnawed at him, sharp and familiar, whispering he'd fail, that this was pity dressed up as a chance, that a guy like him didn't climb out of a truck and into a glass office. Elise stepped out then, her heels clicking soft on the pavement, and sat beside him without a word, her presence steady against his storm. "You haven't opened it," she said, voice gentle but pointed. Jack chuckled, dry and low. "Didn't think I needed to. I know how this ends," he muttered, his gaze dropping to his scuffed boots. She tilted her head, hazel eyes catching the last light. "Come with me, just an hour, no suits, no pressure. Trust me." Against every instinct screaming to bolt, he stood, the folder clutched tight, and followed her to the SUV. They drove north in silence, the city's shine fading into Uptown's quieter streets, until they pulled up to a red brick building with a faded sign. Amos's Haven, a community center alive with kids' laughter, its walls splashed with painted handprints and quotes about hope. Jack trailed her inside, the air warm with crayons and baked bread, the noise of life wrapping around him like a blanket he didn't know he'd missed. Elise led him through a bustling kitchen, past a reading nook stacked with dog-eared books, into a playroom where kids sprawled across the floor, building puzzles, trading comics, chasing each other with shouts that bounced off the ceiling. This place, she said, her voice dropping soft, is for Amos, the man who gave me his coat when I was 13, shivering on a church stoop with nowhere to go. He sat with me all night, didn't ask a thing, just showed me I mattered. Jack's throat tightened, his eyes drifting over the room. A girl tying a friend's shoe, a boy stacking blocks with fierce focus. I never saw him again, Elise went on, turning to face him. But that moment built this. And last week, you gave me the same thing, Jack. Not just a coat, but a piece of who you are. He couldn't speak, the weight of her words pinning him still. And then his eyes blurred. Tears, quiet and unguarded, slipping down his weathered face. He nodded, not for the job, not yet, but for the crack of light she'd let in. He wasn't invisible, not to her. His first day at Horizon Tech came fast. No banners, no fuss, just a small glass-walled room on the 5th floor. A handful of execs eyeing him like a stray dog in a showroom. "I'm Jack Sullivan," he said, voice steady despite the knot in his gut. "I'm here to talk about people, not profits." He shared his story. Sarah's laugh fading to hospital beeps, Liam's rocket dreams in a truck's back seat, choosing kindness when he had nothing left, and asked, "When'd you last really see someone?" They listened, cautious at first, then leaned in, hooked by the raw truth in his words. By week's end, they came to him, interns spilling stress, coders confessing burnout, suits admitting guilt, drawn to his quiet way of cutting through the noise. "You're not weak," he told a programmer hunched over cold coffee. "You're tired from caring. Let someone care back." Horizon Tech shifted slow, then fast. Laughter crept into break rooms. A janitor's name got pinned to a fridge note. Productivity spiked, not from quotas, but from connection. Jack got a corner office, small, cozy, stuffed with secondhand books, a coffee pot always brewing, plants Liam picked out on a weekend run. With Elise's help, he rented a house in Edgewater. A one-bedroom with a creaky porch, a patch of yard, a bunk for Liam, now 19 and back from college. Their first night, they ate pizza on the floor, boxes still packed, Liam grinning wide. "You kept your word, Dad," he said, voice thick. And Jack just nodded, his eyes saying what words couldn't. He and Elise's grew close. Lunches stretched to walks along the lakefront, then movie nights at her place, old black and whites flickering as they talked till midnight. It wasn't loud or fast, just two souls finding steady ground, armor peeling off in the quiet. One afternoon, after a workshop on grit, a kid, 22, pale, eyes sunken, lingered as the room cleared. "I was done last month," he said, voice shaking. "Life. Everything. Then you said people just need to be heard, and it stopped me." Jack's chest seized, his hand landing firm on the kid's shoulder. "I'm damn glad you're here," he said, voice low, and meant it. Because he'd wondered the same about himself, and now he knew. Jack's rewriting Horizon from the inside, folks. This Chicago story's hitting deep, and it's building to something huge. The atrium of Horizon Tech shimmered under a canopy of warm lights, the usual banners of tech wins and profit charts swapped out for soft white drapes and strings of bulbs that twinkled like stars against the Chicago night. Employees packed the space shoulder to shoulder, dressed sharp not for boardrooms, but for something deeper, their chatter fading as a massive sign unfurled overhead, "One Kindness Day," etched in gold letters that caught the glow. Elise Harper stepped to the podium at the center stage, her heels clicking crisp against the polished floor, her hazel eyes sweeping the crowd with a quiet fire. "This day isn't about metrics or milestones," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the hush. "It's about moments. One moment, a year ago, when I stood freezing at a Michigan Avenue bus stop, tired, lost, and a stranger changed everything." A murmur rippled through the room, heads tilting as she paused, her lips curving into a soft smile. "He gave me his coat. Old, worn, but it was everything, because it didn't wait for convenience. It showed up when I needed it most." She turned to an easel beside her, pulling the cloth away with a steady hand. There it was, Jack's olive jacket, frayed at the cuffs, framed in glass like a relic, a bronze plaque beneath it gleaming. One small act of kindness can rewrite a life. The crowd stirred, a low hum of recognition, and Elise's voice wavered just a touch. That night didn't just warm me, it rewrote my path, and today we honor the man who made it happen. She looked to the edge of the stage, her smile widening. Jack, will you come up here? Jack Sullivan rose slow from his seat near the back, a borrowed suit pressed crisp but simple. His weathered face softer now, lined with time but lifted by something lighter, peace, maybe pride. The room erupted in applause as he crossed the floor, his boots quiet against the shine, and stepped up beside her, hands shoved in his pockets, like he still wasn't sure he belonged. Elise reached into her jacket, her own now, sleek and tailored, and pulled out a small envelope, pressing it into his palm. "This is yours," she said, voice warm. He opened it, frowning at first, then froze. A title deed, his Edgewater house, stamped paid in full. Gasps echoed through the crowd, a wave of whispers, and Elise leaned in, her grin flashing. "No more sleeping in trucks, Jack?" The applause roared again, loud enough to shake the glass walls, but Jack raised a hand, his voice cutting through, rough but steady. "Hold up. I've got something too," he said, reaching into his pocket with a tremble he couldn't hide. He pulled out a worn wooden box, its edges smoothed by years, and looked at Elise, his heart pounding loud enough to drown the room. "You said that coat changed your life, but you changed mine. Gave me back my name, my son, a home, hope." He flipped the lid. A silver ring glinted inside, simple, shining quiet under the lights. "I kept this in the truck all those years, Sarah's ring, because if there's anything more valuable than that coat, it's you." The crowd held its breath, a beat of stillness, then Jack's voice dropped low, raw. "Elise Harper, will you marry me?" Her laugh broke the silence, soft, choked, beautiful, and she nodded fast, tears spilling as she whispered, "Yes, of course, yes!" Cheers exploded, a standing ovation shaking the rafters, hands clapping till they stung. A month later, they married at Amos's Haven, the red brick center glowing with paper flowers kids had taped to the walls, mismatched chairs creaking under volunteers and co-workers, a lopsided cake baked by a coder Jack had mentored. Elise wore a simple white dress, her dark hair loose, Jack in that same borrowed suit, Liam at his side as best man, grinning wide in a tie he'd ironed himself. The room buzzed with warmth, fairy lights strung across the ceiling as Elise took Jack's hands, her voice clear through the quiet. "You gave me a coat once," she said, eyes locked on his. "Tonight, I give you my whole life." Jack couldn't speak. Tears slipped down his cheeks, silent and free, and he nodded, the crowd dabbing their eyes as music kicked up, laughter spilling out. The reception rolled into the courtyard, kids running barefoot under twinkling lights, and someone snapped a photo. Jack and Elise beneath the Haven sign, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, that framed jacket on an easel beside them. It went viral overnight. Shared, reposted, a symbol of second chances born from a single act, from a Chicago bus stop to a forever home. Jack and Elise turned one cold night into a legacy of heart, proof that kindness doesn't need much, just a spark to set the world ablaze. What hit you hardest, folks? That rooftop proposal or Elise's vow? Drop a 100 in the comments if this lit you up. I'm reading everyone, from the Windy City to every corner out there. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. This story's a wrap.